Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is Tennessean for an alternative to the death penalty. And we're fortunate to have three persons to talk to us this morning about Tennessee and the death penalty. The first person is the executive director of the organization Tennessee for an Alternative to the Death Penalty, Ms. Stacy Rector. And Ms. Stacy Rector is sitting next to Mr. al1, a person who has his own experiences to talk about dealing with the death penalty. And the third person is Mr. Charles Strobel, who also has a lot of information in reference to the death penalty as well. And let's start off with you, Ms. Rector, and let me welcome all three of you to the show this morning. And let's start off with you, Ms. Rector, by having you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of your career. Mr. al1 will take some time to give us essentially the same type of information in reference to his career. And of course, Mr. Strobel will finish us off doing this first segment, and then we'll come back and talk about Tennesseans for an alternative to the death penalty. Ms. Rector.
Thank you. Well, I'm a native Tennessean, born and raised in Dyersburg, Tennessee, over in West Tennessee, and educated in the state, and actually went to seminary, became a minister, Presbyterian minister, which is really where I initially felt the calling to really learn more and work on issues of social justice. In particular, was troubled by the issue of the death penalty. And so when I moved to Nashville to serve a congregation here, I was very intentional about making sure that I continued to go outside of the church doors and find out what was going on in the community and issues that I cared about. And one of those was by visiting someone on Tennessee's death row. And I did that for 10 years, and that really opened my eyes to a lot of issues. I was then able to begin to learn more about the death penalty, not only from a faith perspective or from a moral perspective, but from a policy perspective, and whether or not, as a citizen, I thought the policy or the system worked. And as I began to learn, I began to see just how broken the system is. And so that was another layer to my commitment to work on this issue, and then getting to know folks like Ndume and Charles Strobel, people who have been directly impacted, whether it's because they've been wrongfully convicted or had a loved one who's been murdered, and how they have responded to the issue has been extremely humbling for me. So after serving the church that I served for 9 years, I took this position as director of this organization to continue what I believe is my call to educate Tennesseans about this issue and to really encourage people to get involved.
Very good. Mr. al1, what's your situation in reference to over the next minute that we have here?
Right. With me, I spent 20 years on Tennessee's death row for a crime I committed. A total of 28 years I sit in prison. June 1st was 2 years since I've been home, and I haven't stopped working on this issue. I think it's an important issue, and I'm very grateful that you having us on and just talking about it so we can educate people about this system and how broken it really is. During the time that I was in prison, I did a lot of different things, but mainly my whole focus is trying to make sure that people not only know about what the system done to me, but what it still continues to do and what it's attempting to do now in terms of these scheduled executions. And but for a miracle, I wouldn't be sitting here. And if I hadn't have been executed already, I certainly would be one of the people that's scheduled to be executed with this whole new move to be trying to execute people.
Okay, Mr. Strobel, let's have a few statements in reference to you, and we'll have a break, and then we'll come back and start with you.
Right. Well, thank you again for having us on and giving focus to this. My first introduction to the death penalty as a theoretical issue was in the seminary. I was born and raised here in Nashville, went to Catholic schools, and then went to the seminary in Catholic University in Washington, D.C. during the 60s. And it was during that time that we looked at all the moral issues of racism and poverty and war and lying and stealing and cheating, and capital punishment was one of those issues. And so that was a theoretical introduction to it, and I found myself moved by that argument against the death penalty. And then inevitably the question would be raised, well, would you feel that way if it happened to a member of your own family? And I said, well, in the objectivity of this classroom, if I'm against it then, I'd think, and I hope I'd be against it.
And of course, let's take this first commercial break, Mr. Stovall, and then we'll come back the second segment, and we'll start with you in reference to that and we'll have you to tell that story.
Thank you.
And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short second segment of the show.